Hey guys, thanks for checking out the My Career Path podcast. Today I have another special guest, Nate Wyne. He is the CEO and co-founder of Floodlight. And so this is someone who I've wanted to interview for a little while as he was in banking. He actually had the exact same undergrad degree that I have in international business. And so it was just fun to talk with him about his path, about his journey, and what kind of led him towards creating his own company with his team. So hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. All right, you guys, welcome to the My Career Path podcast. This is a show where I interview different people about their careers, about their journeys on how they got there, just to kind of help you figure out maybe what you want to do with the rest of your life. So today I have a very special guest, Nate Wyne. Nate, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Colton. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing phenomenal. How's the weather in California? I assume all is well and nice and warm and toasty.
It's beautiful. Went to the beach a couple days ago. It's still there and nice. Sunny.
Still there. How often do you go to the beach?
Beach is kind of like my therapy, so I'm there at least weekly. Otherwise, it feels like you're paying for something that you don't appreciate.
Exactly. Well, awesome. Well, Nate, I'm super pumped to have you on the show. Tell everybody a little bit about your current job and what you do.
Yeah, so I am the founder and CEO of Floodlight Incorporated. We are about 4 years old now, and we have worked steadily to essentially be the greenwash killer. We feel like there's a whole bunch of information out there on company behaviors, some of it by companies themselves and some by others, that at the end of the day is bogus. And Floodlight is built to essentially replace that swamp with concrete so that people can make better decisions.
And so when you talk about greenwash, you're talking about maybe pollution, kind of carbon footprints, whatnot, things like that?
Yeah, just anything outside of financial reporting that's dishonest. So it can be greenhouse gas emissions, it can be commitments towards biodiversity, it can be how their supply chain is formulated from all around the globe, but just any misrepresentation of the facts.
So is that where the name comes from, Floodlight? You're just shining a spotlight to make sure everyone's got a clear picture?
That's right. So we see a lot of our competitors are out there to say good company, bad company, and Floodlight flips that on its head. We don't care. We give you the data. You make the decision about what aligns with your values. But the data we give you is going to be cutting edge, unbiased, and fair.
So you're just outlining the whole picture for people. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are. You're going to give as much information as possible so that they can make informed decisions about it, right?
Yeah, and always with the most rigorous science possible, so that there's a clear audit trail back to what we're doing, and so that our customers actually understand the same methodology we use, we think makes logical sense. Because Warren Buffett actually is somebody who said, like, if you can't explain it in 2 sentences, it's probably not worth it.
Right. I totally agree. Sometimes we use way too much fluff. Totally. And just get to the point. Well, perfect. Well, I kind of want to talk about your journey, your kind of career path, as it were. So when you're growing up, what was the very first job you ever held?
Oof. So 2 things I would say. My parents were pretty focused on giving us Saturday jobs. So other people called them chores, but ours were Saturday jobs. And you couldn't go to your friends' houses. You couldn't watch TV. You couldn't have treats. You had to do the jobs first. So that one, I didn't get paid for that. That was like, hey, room and board covered, dude. But here, you got to mow the lawn. We want you to weed the garden, whatever. But I think the first actual paid work I had was in 4th grade. I grew up outside of Blackfoot in a little town called Pingree, Idaho. And Rockford Elementary had a fundraiser where you could sell chocolate to your neighbors. And if you sold enough, you could get these prizes from a catalog. And I was the most salesy salesman.
Really? Wow.
In 4th grade, I got a set of speakers that worked for like 7.5 minutes and then broke. But I was really proud for moving that much chocolate.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. We had when I was growing up, we had like, what was it? It was like Jump for Life or something like that. It was basically like a jump rope thing. And the more jump ropes or things that you sold, the higher points you got. Yeah. And the top thing was just like a rinky skateboard or something like that. But it was like, as a kid, you're like, yeah, let's do it.
I have so many people that'll eat this stuff.
Yeah.
My kids still try to do it now. And I'm like, this is a waste of time. You're not doing this. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Enjoy life
That's
as a
awesome.
kid. You have the rest of your life.
Yeah, really. You don't need to go door to door. That's funny. Okay, after that, 4th grade, you're picking up sales and whatnot. Where'd you go after that?
Yeah, so when I was in Utah, we moved to Utah when I was 15, and I got a job at the fanciest French restaurant in Salt Lake City. It was called Lacaille. I think it still is. But I was a dishwasher, and it was really hilarious because I had decided that it made way more sense to not mow lawns like a lot of my friends were, and not paying taxes and getting paid in cash. I was like, no, 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 I could work extra hours, and I could actually
That's
do
right.
more things, and I bet you I'll get tips. And so I worked at Lacaille as a dishwasher, and the people that I was interviewing with were like, "Are you sure you want to do this? Like, this is terrible hours. You're in high school. What's going on?" Like, it was in the
Did
summer.
they actually say that?
Yeah, they were literally trying to talk me out of it because they're like,
That's
"This is not a
awesome.
fun job." And like Utah minimum wage was like $5.25 an hour, and
Yeah.
I was just like drooling at the mouth. I'm like, "Wow, I'm gonna get money that my parents don't have to give me." Like, amazing.
Yeah.
And it was hellish. It was the worst job I've ever had by far. And I swore on everything holy that I would never work in food again unless my family's life depended on it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
luckily,
that's right.
I haven't had to. Like,
Haven't had to. Yeah, thank goodness. Yeah, I remember my first job was Chick-fil-A, and so I remember that first day of training, I was the fry guy, and it is very much, hey, get going. It needs to be fast. You just have to be quick. You're always on your feet. And from what I've heard, a lot of the people that I've talked with who have been in the restaurant industry, they're like, no, it's way too much. There's so much effort, stress that's just put on you, and oh man.
and I was 15 and a half, like, so I'm like, obviously it's high school, and like I'm working with a lot of steam and heat and dishwasher and boiling stove. So like I have acne going all over the place, and like it's like just terrible on every level because the hours are like from 8 p.m. till like 2 in the morning, so I can't hang out with my friends at all.
Yeah,
Like,
that's exactly right.
it definitely
Yeah.
made me value like go get an education because this is not what you want to do forever, Nate. And I was like, okay, I got you, Dad.
I'll do it. Yeah, thanks. Perfect. All right. So after dishwashing, you've kind of put that behind you. Where'd you go after that?
Yeah, so I worked at a golf course the next summer between junior and senior year and loved it. Just super early morning, mowed lawns, dug trenches, like built more muscle. So it was kind of fun.
Yeah, you cared to the course.
Mm-hmm. And it
Oh,
was a
man, that'd
country
be
club,
awesome.
so it was fancy, and they would pay us to dive into their lakes and pull and like harvest the golf balls. And like I was always a big swimmer, so that was easy.
Yeah,
And
that'd be awesome.
yeah, it was perfect because I'm an early bird. For Floodlight, most of my clients are East Coast or Europe, so I'm getting up pretty early anyway. So I think that kind of just like set those habits that I've now benefited from. But the golf course was one where I really got to see like hard labor because it's hard like to dig a trench and with just a shovel, and then your boss come over and be like, hey, why didn't you do more? And it's like in a desk job with emails, it's easy to be like, oh, I got distracted. I was researching. I went down a rabbit hole, and like you didn't dig a trench.
It's a lot easier on a desk job to be like, well, I did so much. I sent like 3 emails, and then I worked on a spreadsheet. Yeah.
I did
That's
that. Then
awesome.
I became a not a dishwasher. I became a lifeguard the next summer, which was awesome, super easy work. And then I was a cashier at a sporting goods store before I served a mission for my church after high school. I'm in the Netherlands for 2 years.
Oh,
But
cool.
most of my money that I had saved went towards that endeavor, and then came back, went to college.
Okay. I want to kind of jump into that a little bit because I always love talking with people about how they decided to go to college. What was kind of the main factor driving you there, and what was your degree?
Yeah, so for me, I was definitely raised to say you have to at least get an undergraduate. This is a minimum expectation for your family because it kind of opens the door. And for me, like it was my mother told me at, I think I want to say it was 6th grade. She was like, every time you get an A on a test, you've essentially written yourself a check for $500 or $1,000 or money later
Oh,
down
that's a
the
good way to put it.
And
Yeah.
like that, I was very money motivated. I still am. Didn't work with all of my school subjects, but it definitely made me think like, oh, I get it. My dad was a doctor. He had to really do well in school in order to get the privilege of getting that career, which was hard work, but also produced significant financial benefit. And so it really locked into my head. I was going to go to college, and my parents kind of did we call it the stair step method. It was a little controversial because with my sisters, they were like, all expenses paid. Here, buy games, go off, have parties. With my brother and I, it was like,
Sheesh,
okay,
older sisters.
I know. You get 6 months, and they're like, "We're not paying your rent. We're not paying your car insurance. We're not paying your books. We'll pay your tuition for a bit, but you really should provide for yourself." And I was like, okay, hooray for feminism. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm grateful. They did pay for my undergraduate. I don't mean to sound like a jerk. It was just like, where I'm like, I see my sisters over here complaining about their meal plans on campus, and I'm just like, okay, I'm at the dollar menu at Wendy's again.
Yeah, and this time I can only get 2 things instead of 3. Yeah.
Orders in my change drawer in my car, just praying I haven't. Anyway, it was lots of fun.
Well, that's awesome. What was your main study? What did you choose?
Yeah, so I did international studies for business, and we were the first graduating class, University of Utah, 2005. So they just created the degree, which was really fun for me because I kind of poked around a lot in college. I did some history, I did some architecture, I did art history, and when they introduced that major, I talked to the academic advisor. They're like, "Oh yeah, we could just count all those classes," and so it was kind of this cobbled together thing where I'm like, "Okay, cool, I can get done in 3 years." Boom, let's do this.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, that's awesome. Do you think your time in the Netherlands really kind of affected that choice as well? What made you think international is kind of what you wanted to do?
Yeah, so my mission was eye-opening in multiple ways. Like my church is usually interpreted as being fairly conservative, pretty strong aversion to pornography and a lot of other sexual depictions, and just in general, because we're monogamous and focus on just being married and taking care of each other as a spouse, which is not super popular in the world. But I went from the Missionary Training Center in Provo, Utah, and having grown up and done high school in Sandy, Utah, to my greenie city was Amsterdam, and so just a very different culture. And I thought, being the ignorant 19-year-old that I was, like, oh, I'm going to come here and show all these people how wrong they're living, and they'll be so excited that I'm telling them that this is
exactly.
And instead, what I got was 2 things. I got an up close and personal view of how the Dutch have built a very intelligent and workable system that focuses more on safety, security, and allowing everyone to live the life they want to, instead of in sometimes what happens in the US, where there's a lot more moral denunciations. And so that was my first kind of vision of like, oh, wow, I grew up in a different place, and I thought I was coming to a place that really was crying out for help. And on a religious sense, like obviously, like there's meaning to that for me, but in a social sense, that was where I really saw like, oh wow, if this is Dutch, the Dutch culture, which their country's the size of Massachusetts, there must be hundreds of cultures out there that I'm fully ignorant of. And it really gave me the bug to understand more how cultures work, more languages, more economics and statistics that would help me better understand that I'm obviously a citizen of my country, which I love, but I'm also a citizen of the world. And it's, I think, a duty of people who love their country to treat others with the same respect that you would hold for yourself. So that stuck with me and made it into my career.
Well, I think that's really powerful, and because I also studied international business for my undergrad, and so we have that in similar. And I remember in a lot of my international business classes, like international law and trade and whatnot, we start talking about the U.S. compared to other countries. And one of the ones that really stuck out to me was corruption across the world. And I think a lot of people in my class, including myself, a little bit were like, oh, we're so proud. We're so proud of America and what it is. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but sometimes you have a little bit inflated view of yourself. And it's like, okay, other countries have plenty to offer to us. Like, we're not the best ever. There's things that we can do to help. And we are members of the world. Like you said, I really like that. And I think that's important.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Okay, so after college, you kind of get your undergrad. What were you looking for as far as a job or career after that?
So to be totally frank, I had gone to Los Angeles when I was 8 with my family on a Disneyland trip. And I remember we did Disneyland, then we went to the beach. We stayed in a motorhome and then drove home the next day because we were a big family, so it would have been too expensive for hotels, and Disneyland enough itself was enough. Right. But I remember talking to my dad, really approaching him and being like, Dad, there are people that live here next to the beach and next to Disneyland. Why are we living in Idaho? This doesn't make any sense for me. Like, we should be here because it's more fun and it's nicer. And I just remember him just smiling and being like, oh, just enjoy life. You'll understand.
Yeah, you're such a nice 8-year-old naive.
And also, just like, I mean, I didn't mean to do it. I was 8, but I'm just kind of sticking with the provider. Like, hey, what's wrong with you? We could live here and it's better, Dad. Like, why are we going back there? Anyway, the things you learn now that you have the same kind of experience. And my kids are like, why is our house like 1/8 the size of all of my cousins? And it's like, oh. Anyway,
well,
on.
You know, California. Yeah, that's awesome.
So I moved literally the day after I walked in commencement. I got in my car and drove to Los Angeles and set up shop here. Yeah, I had been offered a job. I gradually worked more and more towards full time through my my undergrad. So I was working full time for Wells Fargo. And had interviewed down in Los Angeles and then in Santa Barbara for a position, and they offered me a transition to a job down here and graduation, and I was like, sure, like there was no negotiation. It was like, you'll pay me? Awesome. Okay, where do I go? And so I moved down here the day after graduation and love it. It's the LA just fits me like a glove.
What was kind of the position? Because I think a lot of people look at banking as a potential career. You know, there's a lot of opportunities. Everywhere you go has banking. So tell us a little bit about that position.
Yeah, it was, looking back on it, it's one of those things where I wish I would have paid more attention. But I was working for Wells Fargo as the assistant branch manager of the Rancho Park branch of West Los Angeles. So it's on Pico and Overland. And this was all during the build up to Wells Fargo opening millions of bogus accounts. And it was a horrendous pressure and guilt and any other manipulative tactic that our leaders could throw on us to go get more checking accounts. And it was honestly, it was a moment for me where I was just like, oh, the adults haven't figured things out. Like, this is a terrible job. And I literally am incentivized to forget about the millionaire who's doing a deposit, who's been a customer for 30 years and done massive deals. I make more money if I run after a college student who could get a credit card. And it made no sense to me, and it made me frustrated. But on the flip side, it really did show me how a bank works, like how deposits work. I went back and did accounting down at UCLA here so I could understand more how the controllers and CFOs think. And so outside of the sales technique, it was a wonderful education in the real world. The selling, the selling stuff, there have been volumes written about it. And I wish I had spoken up more, but I was terrified. And I really thought like there was nothing better than that. Like I had gotten my job and here I was, and I was going to go up the track at this huge bank. And now looking back, I'm just like, oh man, I was so naive. And I wish I could have understood more, what I could have done faster if I had jumped to a different bank, a different career, or a different, even a startup would have been something that I wish I had done earlier.
Yeah. And I think that's just critical. And I think a lot of people experience that throughout their lives. I mean, and something that just in talking with people about their career paths is what I start to see is you kind of learn what you can from one industry. And then even if it was your dream job at first, it kind of moves on. Your dream evolves as you do. And I think that's important to kind of follow that and figure out what you want to do, whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm. And to be totally frank, I really wanted to play beach volleyball and live in Los Angeles, and my job did provide me that. It wasn't, I could have looked for other ones and stuff, but that was, I'm not complaining about what happened in the past. I just wish that I would have had more mentors and more understanding of what was happening so that I could have called out or stopped what I did see, because people literally got destroyed. It was really, really jarring to see kind of how little care and concern the leaders up top had for us on the front lines.
Yeah. Just jumping in here real quick to share a website I've used and will continue to use to improve myself in my career. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 20,000 classes to choose from. Whatever you're passionate about, you can find an amazing class on Skillshare to hone your practice. Skillshare has what you need. Learning is so critical for our lives and is a lifelong journey. Even when we finish school, we should keep on learning and keep working to improve ourselves. So you can try Skillshare absolutely free for 1 month. Go to Skillshare.com and sign up and use the code MyCareerPathFree. That's all lowercase, no spaces, to start your first month at no charge. And when you do decide to keep on taking those classes, use the code MyCareerPath30, that's MyCareerPath30, to get 30% off your first year on Skillshare. Keep learning and keep going. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, so after Wells Fargo, is that when Floodlight kind of started and you jumped onto that?
So I actually know I moved from retail banking, which means like you walk into a branch, that's retail banking. I ended up getting into the commercial office in Beverly Hills. So you would handle much bigger accounts. So like Red Bull and other kind of bigger, well-known brands have much more complicated treasury, lending, and debt relationships than a retail client would. So I moved into being an associate there in Beverly Hills, actually, at their office then. And that's when really a lot more of the accounting kicked in, because I saw how complicated deals would get proposed, how you would win deals from other banks, how the treasury services would be used as wedge products, et cetera. But what really caught my attention is every week we had a pipeline meeting where we would share progress on deals. And we had a capital markets rep from downtown in the Wells Fargo Tower. She was the representative for foreign exchange. And she was so sharp, just on top of world events, understood how those events would then shift the value of currencies. And I was a news junkie anyway, so it was an easy way for me of being like, yes, I know about this. Like I've read this. I love stats. And it was the first time I really saw a professional doing something where I knew I would love that job. And so my sister Lisa had taught me, because she's a pretty successful CPA. She taught me that if you see somebody who has the job you want, be their best friend, offer to get them coffee, offer to do anything you can to have time with them, and then just pepper them with questions, because most people, if they're happy in their job, they're thrilled to tell you about it.
Yeah, and absolutely.
Like, this is why I'm so amazing. I did that whenever she would come. I would sit with her. I would talk to her about world events and news, and we would kind of exchange views on currencies. And then when her analyst retired, I applied for that job, and I moved onto a trading floor. So, 100 people getting up screaming on two phones, Bloomberg and CNBC all the time, so we could watch what's happening with currencies and like making deals and doing huge trades for currencies. And I ate it up. It was absolutely amazing. But that's really, to get to your question, that's when Floodlight really started to form its DNA. Was we had massive amounts of software. So we had Bloomberg and LexisNexis and FactSet and obviously Google search and everything else. But then we also had internal resources where you could dig into company financial statements or into CEO recordings for earnings statements and calls, and then have that extra info to go try and win deals. And I noticed that most of the information outside of financial performance was essentially reported on by the companies themselves. And so if I had a customer, and I did, who said like, hey, are you investing my money in short-term swaps with companies that are extracting oil? Or are you guys doing trades with banks that have facilitated like deforestation in the Amazon, or poor treatment of women, or child slave labor in Southeast Asia, et cetera? And I couldn't answer, because I would go into these systems, and Bloomberg at the time was like $28,000 a year. These were not cheap systems by any means. It was a lot of money, way more than it cost them, way more for the systems they gave me than they paid me in salary, which was also irritating. Because, oh, thanks a lot, everybody. I'll use all these tools to make the final thing, but Nate, we're not going to pay you that anyway. I feel like I'm complaining. Like, I do appreciate my first bank that but just looking back again, you see like, you guys made a killing on me for a long time.
Exactly. How long did I work and really provide a lot of value?
They gave me an acrylic cube this big that had a WF logo in it at my tenure, and I was just like, thanks.
Way to go, Nate. Yeah.
But so that's when I started putting the pieces together. It was like, I bet you, with how much more emphasis asset owners, so people like sovereign wealth funds, bond issuers, major investors, asset managers, and banks, I bet you they will pay significantly for the value side as well as the financial side, because increasingly in our society, people are seeing that one is connected to the other. And if you are great at financials, but then you have disrespected people who don't look like you, or you haven't sought out consensus from your board, or haven't utilized or stewarded the resources that your company needs to succeed, people will punish your stock price just as badly as they'll look down on you for being morally insolvent. And so,
well, especially just with social media and everything else, everything is so visible. And so it's like, if you're, I think, maybe 30, 40 years ago, where it wasn't quite as, 24-hour news and whatnot, you could maybe get away with some of those things. You could kind of, hey, let's do it this way, and it'll look good on the stock end. And now I don't know if you could really get away with that.
I literally remember being on the trading floor during Romney versus Obama, and there was, Bloomberg has news feeds hitting all the time at very specific instances, and the Democratic National Campaign received a last-minute donation from Wells Fargo's Political Action Committee for umpteen $1 million to pay for the rest of the convention. And I had donated to the Wells Fargo Political Action Committee on the promise that it was politically agnostic and it just went for the best interests of the bank. So I called my rep and said, where is the corresponding donation to the Romney campaign? And he's like, no, these decisions are made at the board level. I'm sorry, there's nothing we can tell you. And I'm like, this is bogus, and you're feeding bogus information, and you're using my money for it. And so it really, that got me more into thinking like, I got sold something that's very different than what was promised. And that really ticked me off, and still does. As one of what I do.
I totally get it. And so you started to create this idea of Floodlight. Talk about the people that you kind of banded up with. Yeah.
So one of my best friends is an entrepreneur. His name's Zach James. He's the founder of Zephyr, which is essentially a digital integration with YouTube to guard intellectual property, among other things. But it's really been very helpful, especially for Hollywood studios, to protect what can sometimes just get stolen and misused, et cetera. So we became really good friends. He tried unsuccessfully to teach me how to surf. I'm terrible at surfing, but we would chat a lot because I would share frustrations from my work. He would share his, and he would just like, Nate, you're doing like 3 skills, like they're good skills. Like these, you can make a lot of money doing this, but like you're forecasting where currencies are going. You're selling essentially insurance products to these companies, and then you're wrapping it up in a nice bow. And I was like, well, yeah, and I'm taking care of my family and everything. I've got food on the table. And he's just like, no, it's fine. But like, you're in an amazing place. There's investors, there's lawyers, there's people like me who will help you. Have you ever had an idea that would really, really kind of make a difference? Not to disrespect banking, because I certainly respect a lot of people there. But for me, it was definitely him saying, this is what you're contributing. Like, this is Nate Wyne's gift to the world. And I was like, ooh. Because he's built an incredible company that really protects a lot of intellectual property that artists and others really would be absolutely out of luck without. So it's definitely something where I looked around what he had built with his team and his family and friends. It wasn't just him, but like I looked around at what he had done and said, Nate Wyne is capable of doing more than capital markets. And this was I transitioned from Wells Fargo. I got recruited over to Silicon Valley Bank here in LA, which just added fuel to the fire because I was doing the same job. I was doing capital markets, but I was traveling a lot more. So I covered all of Latin America. I invented a couple of new products for them that were super fun. But then I would see that look in customers' eyes of like, I am building something that's changing the world. And I would get more jealous. I'm just like, because I was getting paid more and I had a prestigious job and I worked with brilliant people and it was fun. I loved it. But I could definitely feel that kind of creeping emptiness, of like, oh, I'm facilitating other people changing the world and I'm making good money, full stop. And I'm like, I can't let this be my contribution. I need to jump.
Well, I just really like that about knowing what your contribution is. Like, is that all it's going to be? And not that you can't just work a normal 9-to-5 job every day and have that same fulfillment, but understanding that I think we're all here for a purpose. And there's things that we can do to contribute to the world as a whole, to our country, to even our city, however small or big it may be, we have kind of a responsibility to figure that out and go for it.
Yeah. And you can, that's one of my favorite things about the US. Like we literally have the most mobile society, and
Yeah.
Regardless of the naysayers and who bring up, racism or any of the other problems, we have the most proportion of entrepreneurs of every color, gender, etc. of the world. So we're not perfect, but we're certainly the ones that are striving and building laws and opportunities to facilitate that. And I think it's very important that people take up that opportunity, because it's much easier to sit on the sidelines and say, like, the system is stacked against me, I'm not going to give it a shot. And I think that's absolute bogus. And I think you're really just telling yourself, like, I'd rather not try.
Yeah. Well, and that's something in the book I was reading and did a review on. It's Leadership and Self-Deception. It talks about how we start to see the world as kind of justifying our own behavior and justifying where we are, even though that may be the case, it may not be the case. But the more we see that and the more we kind of take on that victim mentality, the harder it is for us to kind of break away. And I would agree with you. I think there's a multitude of opportunities. And I think where a lot of people get tripped up is they think their dream job is going to be on Indeed as an application. You're just going to happen upon it and you're like, yeah, this is exactly perfect what I want to do. And it really comes more from, how are you going to create that position? How are you going to be able to create that value for someone else?
100%. I totally agree.
If someone were looking to maybe join Floodlight, like, send an application, join your guys' team, what would be probably the main traits that you look for in those people?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that we would look for is creativity. The systems that we're going after, there are brilliant people that are managing trillions of dollars and that have done this because they have wonderful degrees and mountains of experience, and they know how to look for value. Where what we introduce to them is another lens, another way of looking at their money through a lens that they haven't thought of before, that does have materiality. And I've noticed now, 4 years in, that if I bring people to the party that are just straight up sales or just straight up operations or just straight up customer satisfaction, that can be nice. And when we're a 100 person company, I think we'll need more of those,
right.
But I hope not. I hungered for the ability, as Zach had told me, he's like, you're doing 3 things and you're doing them really well. As a startup founder, I have to do 100, not terribly. Like I can't let any of those be an F. I need to have at least a C, and I need to be an A+ at like at least 10 of them, or the company dies. So it's been an interesting education, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think having creativity is really important. How important do you think someone maybe having a degree or a master's degree would be in applying?
Not at all. I definitely think education reveals a commitment to lifelong learning. I'm very proud of the University of Utah in that it taught me that I needed to keep learning my whole life. It wasn't here's your degree, you're done. It was, here's your degree, go fix the world. And so I definitely, if I interview people, I'm looking for what they are trying to accomplish in their life, and I'm looking for what they can see Floodlight do to align those 2 endeavors, because this is the happiest I've ever been in a job. Not to say that it's all been sunshine and roses. It has not been, and it's been way harder than any other job I've ever done. But like, I've never had anywhere close to the kind of job satisfaction that I have now.
What about the traits of the people that you work with? How big is Floodlight right now?
Yeah, so we have 7 full-time and then another 5 that are contracting for us. And then we have a network of probably another 10 folks that we have done, various creative equity plans to get their good minds in with us. But we've essentially had to balance for resources to pull that in. So I'd say like there's probably 20 that I would consider like in the family.
Part of the Floodlight family. Great. What would you say are some of the best traits that are with the people you work with? Something that maybe you look at and aspire to.
Yeah. So my wife will always tease me about just like not being as detail oriented as I should be. Like sometimes if I just remember like when I was working for Wells Fargo, I had to sign probably 30 things a day. Like we would audit a teller, or we would check a ledger, or we would, like
Your
drill
signature slowly just degrades to a straight line.
And my dad was a doctor, so like I definitely saw
exactly
signing, moving, because otherwise, if you have a beautiful curly Q signature, you will do nothing else.
Yeah.
But like the being able to understand where I have to be detail oriented, where I have to be a watchmaker versus where I can, be a popcorn dispensary, is a huge skill, for me to be able to say like, this has to be 100% right, because no one's going to invest in me if I can't build a financial model, and no one's going to buy from me if my final product has major typos, and no one's going to look at Floodlight as a credible institution if we don't line up to the regulatory environment that Brussels and Tokyo and Washington, D.C. someday, but Brussels and Tokyo have already created now. I have to have those line up or I'm not credible. And I would say my two co-founders, Dr. Suchi Gopal and Josh Pitts, they're both published authors in their own right. They're very, very accomplished professionals in academia as well as the business world. And nothing comes from their pens without it being almost perfection. And so it does set a high bar for me to feel like, okay, if we are three co-founders, I need to step up, because I cannot share a stage with these guys and be the one who's like, oops, I forgot my homework. Sorry.
Do you also have that kind of imposter syndrome where you're like, maybe, I don't know, like, should I really be here? Should I really be with these other two founders who are so renowned in a way, I guess?
The imposter syndrome thing is interesting for me. I don't have it. And it's
really
mostly, yeah. And I don't mean it as like, I am just like, Elon Musk or anything else. I'm not.
Yeah.
I 100% am not as accomplished as most of the entrepreneurs I've ever met. But for me, like having seen like Enron crash and having seen other businesses make terrible ethical mistakes, like Lehman Brothers and a lot of other like bailouts that have happened, and just seeing how society and really intelligent people with great degrees and great experience and great pedigrees made bafflingly stupid decisions really makes me say like, hey, look, like I'm going to give you my best. Like I'm not going to be dishonest. I'm not going to embezzle anything. And I'm really going to make Floodlight into a force for positive good in the world. That destroyed the imposter syndrome for me, because there are so many people that are not imposters that are doing terrible things.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be more of us that actually say like, I see you there.
Yeah, exactly.
They're the popular kids, and they're like panels and talk shows saying like, oh, I'm saving the world. And it's like, you are not.
Yeah. Well, I think it was Doug Moss, another one of my uncles who always said, I think it was when Hayden was going on his mission, he was like, look, there's been people who have been a lot stupider than you have done this, and people who have been a lot smarter than you have done this. So you can make it. Like, it's going to work out.
Yeah,
and I think that's important to know. It's more about what we can control and what we can do, and kind of focusing on that. Mm-hmm. I kind of want to ask you a little bit about entrepreneurship as well, because I think that's a very enticing avenue for a lot of people, and I think a lot of people think it's really easy. You just kind of have to get lucky in a way. You just have to have that idea. Talk to about that first year of Floodlight. What was that kind of like?
Yeah, like I was a real idiot. I genuinely believed that leaving Silicon Valley Bank and having 13 years of banking experience, having all the networking that Silicon Valley Bank brought to me in terms of VCs and accountants and lawyers, etc., I thought venture capitalists would be lining up to give me millions of dollars to build a company. And looking back, it's like, it's so terrifying how deluded I was.
Yeah.
Our first institutional investor was Village Global in San Francisco. And I remember we were sitting at Superba Bread here at on Lincoln Boulevard in LA, which is one of my favorite restaurants in the world, because it's bread and I really like bread. It's just one thing. But I remember the two folks, Adam and Rina, chatting with me about, and my co-founder, about what we were building. And it was very much, we are going to invest in you because we love what you guys are doing together and what you're building. And it never made sense to me until that moment that it was more of a bet in us and in what we were going to do, instead of, I have created this PowerPoint and now all I have to go do is build it, and then people will be paying me millions of dollars just like they did for Uber and just like they did for Amazon. Like, I'm next. And you could see in their eyes, they're like,
I'm next.
We love the enthusiasm. It's going to be a harder road than you think, but we are going to put money into this because we think you have what it takes. And that still like means so much to me, that people would be that believing of somebody that was so arrogant and so ignorant of the world I was walking into. So that was a biggie for me.
Yeah. So I think in what you were saying, it's a lot more about what you choose to do rather than maybe the $1 million idea, kind of going for it and editing as you go.
Yeah, and being flexible to, oh wow, like let's like, it's called a pivot, that's a big term for like, oh, we are going to build this direction, now we're going the other way. I think it's much more nuanced than that. I think every company pivots or just transitions into a finer product. There are certainly like absolute anomalies that just pop up from good R&D and brilliant minds. But that hasn't happened to us. It's been a lot more listening to the customer, studying the market, building, going back, listening some more, getting people to finally tell you like, hey, this is stupid, because most people want to tell an entrepreneur like, yeah, great, I love what you're doing. I'm never going to talk to you again and I won't buy this because it's garbage.
Exactly.
But good for you. I love that you're doing this. Bye.
Yeah. A lot of talk of like, yeah, this is a great idea. Of course. No, I don't need it. I don't want it. No, I'm good. But I'm sure it's a great idea. Yeah.
Or they'll say,
That's
like,
awesome.
follow up with me in a couple of weeks. I would love to do more. And so you do all this homework. And in the end, they were just looking for a way to exit.
way out.
You feel like a jerk.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Entrepreneurship's super fun, everybody.
It definitely has its moments, I think, because I think, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, and I have a little bit with my podcast as well, where you just kind of feel this like, I'm actually doing something. I'm actually hopefully having an impact, and there's people who've reached out, and I'm like, you know what, this is worth it. This is worth it to me. It's something that I've invested in. So I think it's really amazing, but it's definitely not the easiest thing. It's a lot of hard nights, a lot of hard work, and going, okay, I got to do something for this next week. How am I going to keep learning? How am I going to keep improving, and kind of going from there? That's
totally right.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Nate, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, to share your story, talk about Floodlight. It's just been awesome. Before you go, one last thing, because I love asking people about this. What is one probably really funny or humorous story that you have from your career path that you'd be willing to share with us?
Sure. So we, I'm more than happy to say his name because I think he would laugh when he heard it too. His name's Alan Patrickoff. He was one of the founders of Greycroft, which is a very prestigious VC. They have offices in LA and other kind of high centered, like high money center places. And through some finagling and networking, we got, my original co-founder and we got a meeting with him within weeks of us formally leaving the bank. Because somebody under him had said like, wow, I love this idea. Maybe we should invest in them. And if you don't know, getting money from Greycroft when you're just like 2 days out of the field is like you just got into Harvard after kindergarten kind of thing. It's like you get all the resources as well as the money and the mentorship to really help you be successful. So when we got we went and did the pitch to the Greycroft partner. And their team, they liked us, but it wasn't like, where do we sign? It was, interesting. Let's keep tabs. We'll follow up, etc. And then 5 hours later, I got a text from the associate saying the founder of our fund, Alan Patrickoff, is in town tomorrow and would like to meet you. And so I was so pumped. I'm like, oh, wow, it's happening. See, like I'm the next Elon, I promise.
This is going to blow up.
Like, at one point, he's just going to cry. Like, so we set it up in this coffee shop in Santa Monica. We're sitting there. We're doing the pitch. It's super loud. Tables are clanging everywhere. He had a hearing problem, so he couldn't hear much of what we were saying, and he hated it. It was like he was super professional and very kind, and like bought me hot chocolate. Like really super nice guy. Very much like, I don't care for your business at all. This is not going to be successful. best of luck to you. It's not going to work. But which I like now, like 4 years in, I am so grateful for. If VCs would be so much more cut and dry, to be like, I don't like your idea and it's not what we do, or you're at the wrong stage, or I don't gel well with you, blah, blah, blah. I am so much happier rather than like, hey, do a bunch of homework and I'll put it in a drawer and never talk to you again. And then I'll say hi to you at the next big event that's in town.
Rather than give you false hope, it's just like, just rip it off. Just tell me.
Sorry, I promise I'm getting to the funny part. It's just like fun to relive it. But so as we're setting up the initial conference with the four of us, so it's Mr. Patrick Koff, one of his associates, and then my co-founder and I move the table over so that we can hear better. I pick up a chair and move it over to the side just as he bends down. And my co-founder's just like, the chair leg moved right across his forehead. Like literally, like you can see like the tiniest mark where like the leg hit. And so we walk out of there being like, so the billionaire hated our idea, one. I almost cut his head off with a chair, two. And in the end, we have no idea what we're going to do now. We just wrote. So we high-fived each other and said, I'm sure it'll go up from here. Like,
exactly. Yeah, nothing like starting from the bottom. Oh, that's awesome. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Nate. I hope you were able to take something away from this interview. For me, it was really about, is this the kind of influence that I want to have on the world? And trying to think about that constantly to figure out what it is we want to accomplish. If you did like this episode, make sure to leave a 5-star review. Make sure to send me an email, colten, COLTEN, at mycareerpathpodcast.com. I'd love to know what careers you guys are interested in. Hopefully I can get someone on the show to talk about it. Until next time, I'll catch you guys later. See ya.